Alright, here we go, boys. Put some respect for my name, Grave Ward. Oh, good night. Good night, that was it. Easy. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, what is this, like take 200? Goddamn. Woo! Let's go, baby. That's what I was waiting for. Oh, yeah. Hey, what is going on, you guys? It's Epic here and welcome back to a new video. Guys, this might be one of the most powerful Zane builds I've ever made. I'm not even kidding. This is absolutely insane. The name of the build is Grim Reaper Zane, and I actually have a funny story. I don't want to waste time, but I do have a funny story behind the name of this build. So the other night I was doing some slaughter shaft with Valventine, and I was asking him, like, you know, some names for this build because I couldn't think of a name, and he said, what does the build consist of? And my answer to Valventine was simply death. And then it hit me, oh my god, what better name to call this build than the Grim Reaper? While I keep rambling on, I'll put the tree on screen. Now you can copy that straight into your game, and additionally, now that I've made the switch to PC, if you are on PC, below you can find a download link to this build so you can go and use it. But yeah, this build focuses heavily on death. I really don't know what more to say. Everything will die when you use this build. Bosses are not a challenge, even enemies, just seriously not a challenge. I've killed myself with this build more times than I can count. Just everything dies with this build. I will say that this build definitely could be improved. I'm not saying this is the best build out there. I always think no matter what, anything can be made better, so I'm not saying that this is as good as the build can be. It can definitely be improved. I just don't think it needs to be, but this build is something special. And I realized that when I was testing this, and I'm sure you're going to see a bunch of skills in here that you think that doesn't need to be there, but trust me, I've tested it and it deserves to be there. So yeah, this build, like I said, is something special. Not to mention as well, nearly any gun you put on this build works. Like, there's so many guns that aren't in this build that easily could have been, but I just didn't put them in there because they just didn't need to be there. But there are a few choices of weapons in this build which I'm sure you're not going to see coming. So without further ado, let's get right into the weapons and items and all of that stuff. So as with all of my build videos, every time I talk about an item, you will see a card on screen of where you can get the item, and yeah, hopefully that helps you guys out. So the first gun in the build is the Nighthawkin. This gun really earned my respect. If you remember, I did a top 5 and the Nighthawkin was not in that top 5. I cannot tell you how much I regret that looking back on it, because the Nighthawkin is without a doubt my favorite SMG of all time. Like, this is the greatest SMG in Borderlands 3 in my opinion. When you put this SMG on, switch to burst fire, and then you've got that sentinel cryo damage, I can't tell you just how insane it is. Like, it shreds almost anything ad-wise. Next up is the Lob. And this is another gun which needs no introduction. The Lob right now is, even after its quote-unquote nerf, it's still one of the most powerful shotguns in the game by far. Yeah, so the Lob with this radiation element on it. Now, I would prefer like maybe a fire element, but when it comes to most enemies in DLC 2, they do resist fire, so I tend to stray away from that. But honestly, you can use pretty much any element you want, you know. I just only use a radiation one. I do think actually I do carry a shock one with me. That's the one I tend to use most, but the radiation one for DLC 2 enemies seems to be my go-to. But yeah, for something like the slaughter shaft, you probably want a shock one with the sentinel cryo. It just does crazy damage. Next up is the first of many DLC 2 weapons, and it is the Soul Render in the shock element with, of course, Sentinel Cryo. You want that on basically everything if you can. The Soul Render is extremely powerful. and I am yet to do a legendary guide on it because I've just been too busy. But I will say that the Soul Render is one of the better weapons from this new DLC, and when you pair it with this build, it just absolutely destroys. Next up, we have a Scourge with, again, Sentinel Cryo here, and listen, I would have a Fire Scourge, but these things are like chicken's teeth when it comes to finding them. If I could get one, it would be in the build, but I only have this non-elemental one. But yeah, honestly, this weapon right here is absolutely insane. We're going to come back and talk about this weapon a little bit later because it does tie into a mechanic that we do utilize with this build, but yeah, really cool weapon. For our shield, I have the Cryo Element Old God. Very importantly, Cryo Element Old God. Why Cryo? Because we're always using Sentinel Cryo Anointment, so extra Cryo damage is always a plus. We also get like elemental damage resistors, max health, and chance to absorb bullets as ammo. Really cool. These things again are like chicken's teeth to get in this DLC because they are a world drop, but they are super good. This one right here isn't the best one, but I've been farming for so many and I just can't seem to get a decent one to drop, so this one we'll have to do. Next up, I have the It's Piss Grenade with on grenade thrown, weapon grenade, and action skill damage increased by 25% for 6 seconds. Anointment, really handy. I didn't use grenades in my last Zane build, but in this one we do, and we'll talk about that more a little bit later. But actually, I guess we can talk about it now. So basically, our Sentinel does now have that grenade drop skill, so we're going to be dropping these grenades periodically, which is pretty handy, and you're not going to use it that much, but you do use it sometimes. For our artifact, we have the Pearl of Ineffable Knowledge. This is such a great artifact. I can't even sum it up in like a quick period of time. This deserves its own video. It is so good. The only downside to the Pearl is that in order to proc its special effect, you need to be dealing damage every second, and if not, then your stacks are going to go down, and yeah, that's kind of sucky, but I guess it's balanced. But when you're using the lob and you pair it with this artifact right here, you can deal just crazy amounts of damage. It's absolutely stupid. For our class mod, of course, we have the Seeing Dead class mod. If you can, get as many points into Donnybrook as you can, but it's not all that important. But the Seeing Dead, again, needs no explanation. This is just going to make it so that we are proccing our kill skills non-stop, and yeah, this is like a must-have. I think we all know that by now. Into our backup gear, this is the stuff that we're going to be switching out to periodically. Some stuff is just there because I like having it there, but most of this we will be using. The first, of course, which is the anti-freeze class mod. This is going to make it so that when we're sliding, we're going to just deal so much more damage. This class mod as a whole will make us just super quick and make us deal so much damage, and that's how you achieve them crazy kills like you saw in the opening. But we can't just get them crazy kills alone, you know. The anti-freeze, while it is great, it does need its partner in crime, and in that case that is the Snowdrift Victory Rush for me. This is going to allow us to, of course, get that 110% slide speed. We also get 80% bonus cryo damage. Absolutely insane. Of course, when we kill a badass, we will trigger Victory Rush and get plus 18% movement speed and damage. Really handy if you're running like the Slaughter Shaft. And yeah, just absolutely insane. Really great. This is what you want to be using if you're going for them really fast kills. Next up, I have a redistributor, and this right here usually should be in shock element. I don't have a shock one. If I could get one, then you know it would be in here. I only have radiation. The redistributor I've already done a video on. If you want to see like a little look into how it works, you can find that video in the description down below. Now, I used to pair this weapon with the electric banjo. You can still do that. I just don't do it because I don't think you need to. I think it does great without it, but if you want extra damage, you can pair it with an electric banjo. The same can be said about the Maggie. This is just my all reliable. I keep it in there for when nothing else in the build will work, which is basically never, so if you want, skip out on the Maggie as well. These two weapons right here, we have a corrosive and shock cutsman. Of course you know what these are for. This is for when we are just wrecking face in the Wotan boss fight. I'm trying not to take up too much time explaining these right here because let's face it, everyone knows what the cutsmans are, especially if you've used my builds in the past. We of course have a shock lob. Like I said, this is what I use most of the time. If I'm killing Wendigo, then I'm using the radiation one, but the lob is pretty much like I said, a must-have, and the shock one is what I'm always carrying around. And then the final weapon in the build is the Anarchy. If you don't know what this shotgun is, you're living under a rock. This thing is easily the best shotgun in the game right now. The only reason why it's in my backup gear and not at the forefront of the build is because I just personally do not like the Anarchy. I don't really have anything against the Anarchy. I just think that it's definitely going to be nerfed in the future, so if I make a build focused around it right now, it's just going to make my build redundant when that nerf comes around. But yeah, the Anarchy is a really powerful shotgun. I have a radiation and fire one on this save, so if you're downloading it, you will get them. And yeah, I use this a bunch, but you really don't need it in the build. But by all means, if you want to use it and abuse it, then you absolutely can, but I just prefer not to use the Anarchy. That's just my choice. But yeah, that basically does it for everything in this build. Like I've put so much work into just finding what works, what doesn't work, and I will say that the switch to PC was definitely a learning curve, but it's been a fun one nonetheless. Especially because if you know me, you know that I love to play with low level shields, and that is an exploit, and I wanted to move away from that because I know some people are against it. So coming off of that extremely easy build onto something like this was definitely a challenge, and I wanted to make sure that before I release a new build, it's very easy to play. You know, I didn't want a build that you pick up and you struggle to learn it. I would say the only thing that's like that with this build is maybe the boss killing abilities for like the Scourge and stuff. I think if you've never tried slide speed kills before, then this might affect you, but for me, I was able to pick it up pretty quickly. But all in all, I do think the large geographic will take to this build a lot. It's definitely one of the most powerful builds I've ever made. In fact, probably the most powerful build I've ever made. I do hope you guys enjoy the build. If you have anything to add to the build, or you think I should change something to the build, do let me know. I'll update the save file for them PC players, so yeah, be sure to let me know about that. And if you don't like the build, well, I mean, you don't have to use it. You know, this is just for the people that have been asking for it. This is the build that I'm using right now. But apart from that, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video, and I do hope you enjoyed this build. If you do, feel free to drop a like on the video or even subscribe. And with that being said, have a nice day.